This is a Culture Inject production. The Nevers Podcast presents Firefly, Back in the Skies.
Welcome, listeners, back to our retrospective series, Firefly, Back in the Skies. I'm Laura.
And I'm Taheg, and this week we're watching a real fan favourite, Out of Gas.
So a quick synopsis for everyone. When Serenity's life support system fails, Mal orders the crew off of the ship on Serenity's only two shuttles while he stays behind. This originally aired on October 25th in 2002.
The cast is all the usual ne'er-do-wells, plus Dax Griffin as Bester, who somehow manages to have a more sci-fi name out of character than he does in character. And Stephen Flynn, who I swear I recognise as Captain Sash. This episode was written by David Solomon and directed by the ultimate power couple, Tim Minear and Joss Whedon.
So just a couple quick interesting facts about this episode. So Gina Terez's character, Zoe, spends most of this episode unconscious in the ship's medical bay, partly because Torres was absent for part of the shoot as she was on her honeymoon. Which is funny because this episode focuses, not largely, but it's kind of like how everyone meets and you see how Wash and Zoe meet, and it's interesting. So it's funny that she was off on her honeymoon.
They're married to Lawrence Fishburne, which I only realised quite recently. I didn't realise they were a couple. Apparently they're not anymore, but yeah, it was her honeymoon to Lawrence Fishburne from The Matrix. Yeah.
I also, I don't know if this was true, but someone at a convention told me once that she doesn't fly. She's scared of flying. So isn't often at conventions, obviously, like out of the country or whatever. So I'm not sure where her honeymoon was or whether this is true, but that's what I was told once. Anyway, moving on. While the crew was trying not to think about their fates, Inara and Simon chatted about death, and Inara says, "I don't want to die at all." She also gives a look as if there is a lot more behind this in this episode. So this statement, combined with the mystery syringe, raised questions. We now know that Joss planned to have Inara dying from a terminal illness. So it's a storyline that never made it to the forefront due to the series getting cancelled so early on, but it's front and centre in James Lovegrove's 2021 Firefly novel, Life Signs. And we'll talk more about that moment later on when we get to it. So something subtle at the time but painfully obvious now is River's attempt to soothe Book. So here Book was worried about a slow and painful death. He wasn't big on the idea of suffocating to death, and who can blame the man? So River tries to comfort him by telling him that this wouldn't happen and instead they would freeze to death. However, Book didn't actually verbally state this fear out loud. River just pulled it from his mind, whether or not he realised it at the time. So there's a chance he knew and stayed quiet about it, or perhaps he only thought back to it later. And I guess most prominent fact here is that this is the highest rated episode of Firefly on IMDb. So it's obviously a clear fan favourite.
Very much so. I think this and The Body are probably the two most highly rated Joss works in the fandom, except for maybe Once More with Feeling, but that kind of gets a pass. I did watch it again the other day, and it is still an absolute classic.
Oh, it is.
So yeah, this is so some really interesting facts there. I particularly like the Life Signs one. We'll cover that more later on. But yeah, this is a really fun episode. It opens with a quite kind of melancholy melody playing in the present time while we see Serenity just floating through space, and it's all looking pretty grim. The camera travels to a different, like, empty room to empty room, no sign of life, kind of very Mary Celeste, kind of half-finished dinners and upturned chairs. And we see Mal just fall into frame, collapsing into the cargo bay floor. And we hear this voice coming from the door. "You buy this ship, treat her proper, she'll be with you for the rest of your life." It's this kind of salesman, sort of very kind of 1940s patter. It's very kind of appropriate for the era. Light falls across Mal's face as the door opens, and we realise that we're being taken back to the moment in Mal's memory where he first entered the ship with Zoe.
Yeah, it's a great opening, this. The music, you're just kind of like, what's going on here? This is all very soothing and bleak and weird, and it's like interesting getting a look, and we get another look later on where, like, just seeing through the ship. Often on TV shows, you know, when you have an apartment or a hospital or whatever the setting is, like, none of the rooms are actually really joined together, and you never really see, it's all like cuts from one room to the other. which is similar in this show, but now we're getting like this real through look of kind of the whole ship, and you get a really good look at that later on as well. It was one of my favourite things is getting to see, just really get to see the space without all the people in it, like get to see the ship without all the people.
Yeah, and I love the shot where he's kind of laying on the floor and you just see this light wash over his face. It's all very kind of go into the lights, very heavy with the inference. Another time they use that really brilliantly is if he's in it in the film Leon, as known internationally as The Professional.
Yeah,
there's this one scene where Matilda, played by an incredibly young Natalie Portman, is like knocking at the door, and like there's the sort of the crooked cops are slowly converging on her from behind as Leon opens the door, and just the light washes over her face. It's like it's a very clear relation between the two scenes, and it's such a beautiful shot, and they pull it off brilliantly.
Yeah, and throughout this episode, so as we go forward into our first kind of flashback, it's very kind of like sepia toned, you know, to kind of like let us know when we're in the past and when we're here. It's a bit like hazy almost, and like, I don't know, just like it's something at the back of your memory. So it's, yeah, the lighting and everything is different. But so our first flashback, we
scratched
see
old film reel.
Yeah, like that. And we get to see, first of all, Mal and Zoe boarding the ship that he's recently bought. But she's, you know, taken aback as its rundown appearance, you know, and can't believe he paid for this death trap. So Mal is insistent that it's good, you know, that it's a solid ship, and waxes eloquent about like freedom from the Alliance and the ship's possibilities once they find a small crew. As they leave to the tour, he tells Zoe he's even got a name picked out, as we all know will be Serenity. So it's a really nice moment, you know, because we know where they've come from, and they're trying to get trying to get some of their freedom back as much as they can. So I was going to say, my favourite little moment is at the end, he says, you know, we'll get her running again. And she's like, get her running again? So not running now. And they just give this little like, Yeah,
that's a great line. There's a couple of really brilliant lines in that sort of opening scene. The other one I really love is, a ship like this will be with you till the day you die. That's because it's a death trap, sir. So fun. And like, it's one of those things where it's a fun, like, taken on its own, it's an incredibly funny line, and it's classic sort of Whedon banter, but within the greater frame of the episode, it's like, man, that's some serious foreshadowing there. Love it.
Yes. So the flashback then pans back to Mal in the present time, bleeding, and you see like the blood drip. It's very kind of like shots different to what we're used to, I guess. It's very like slow, and it pans down and we see the blood dripping through. Obviously, we know that he's been shot or injured in some way. So we're like panicky, and then it cuts straight to the credits. We're just like, oh, here's this little song that we love so much, but like, you know, can you get us back to Mal, please? Because we think he's dying. So we see him then clutching his stomach, and he laboriously drags a machine part along the catwalk. The camera pans up into the dining room, a deck above, to a near-present flashback of the crew enjoying a meal and telling amusing anecdotes from their past. The vital scene shows what a family the crew has become, sitting around a large dining table, eating, talking and laughing. You know, it sets up the rest of the episode for the revelations of how they all met. And yeah, I mean, I love this. This was like just the opening with them all just laughing, and it's just kind of like, oh, what a happy family they are. But coming from seeing, you know, Mal's alone on the ship and he's been injured and possibly, you know, looks like he's dying. What's going on? How did we get from that to this kind of thing?
The juxtaposition is fantastic. I also really want to know the end of Simon's story involving the upright man that walked into the ER. I'm pretty sure we all know where that's ending, but I want to hear Simon tell the story because I think it'll be funny.
But he is very much like...
Somehow hearing Simon tell it would make it funnier.
I have some friends who are like... I love them to bits, but when they start telling a story, it's all very... okay, yeah. So I was here, and it was Tuesday, or it might have been Thursday, and anyway, then this happened, and it's like the story's gonna get there eventually, but it's almost painful, like the journey to the story. And it's like, oh, you feel so sorry for him because he's obviously like never been surrounded by like a group of friends or ever this close to be like share stories like this. And he's like really kind of probably really happy because he's like been asked to share and he thinks everyone's there listening. But then it's like really nerve wracking as well. And he's just so cute, bless him.
And then, of course, Jane has to ruin it all by just being like, anyway, so you must have some funny horse stories, Inara. Because Jane is terrible.
Yep, Jane must be Jane.
Kaylee arrives with a surprise birthday cake for Simon that is basically just the meal they had but covered in chocolate icing. Sadly, before the doctor can blow it out, there's a power failure accompanied by a somewhat odd sound, causing Kaylee to start towards the engine room, just as River quietly announces, "Fire." A fireball shoots through the passageway. Zoe leaps up to push Kaylee out of the way and gets hit by the leading pressure wave, throwing everyone to the ground. Mal quickly shuts the rear entrance to the common area and the engine room is engulfed in flames. Simon can't get to his medical supplies because the ship is sealed up. Mal remotely opens the cargo bay doors to blow the atmosphere, sucking the fire out with it. I love how quickly this scene goes from happy cakes and fun to, oh shit, everything's on fire. Like,
yep.
The switch is just immediate and it's so jarring because you're like, everything's nice. Oh fuck, we're all going to die. And we never got to try the cake.
Never got to try that cake. That cake was huge as well. I was thinking to myself, like, they're usually quite neat on like rationing and stuff sometimes. And then I feel like they've like wasted all this because they've said that it's like the same food that they just had for dinner and they've just like made this huge cake. But it's so cute and it has just like the big candles stuck into the top of it.
Yeah, all these completely like, it's like it's very bizarre, it's mismatched, bizarre. Like, it kind of sums up Kaylee in a way, in that it's all a bit sort of mismatched and hodgepodge, but there's obvious clear love behind it. Like, she really tries her best with the somewhat limited resources she has, which, really kind of speaks to her character. But the whole scene does raise one interesting question. Obviously, when they confront Simon with his big cake, River kind of gives this long, complex, scientific explanation with the end of punchline being, she'd actually forgotten it was his birthday, so she didn't get him anything. But this is a question I've had throughout kind of most sci-fi, but we're only talking about Firefly here, so I'll focus on Firefly. Do they actually have like a centralized date? Is the day the same regardless of where you are in the verse? Because that seems like it would have problems. Like, are we even sure it's actually his birthday?
Yeah, I'm not sure because, how do you... Yeah, like, keeping track... Obviously, like, just on one planet we have, such a big hour time difference that it's sometimes a different day on different places. So, like, in the terms of, like, a galaxy or a universe, how are we, like, keeping track of all this? And does every planet keep track the same? Because surely all the planets are going to have, like, different... like sun cycles and the years are going to be longer or shorter, and it seems problematic. So I don't know, I guess in like Star Trek or whatever they have like a star date which is for the whole universe or whatever, I would imagine. I don't know how it works. They don't really reference the date in Firefly or whatever, do they?
Well, I mean, they talk about getting to places in the right... Like, how do they know that if they've been told to arrive on X planet on Y date, they can actually even get there in time if they don't know? Like, if they... you'll get there in 3 days. What's a day? Yeah,
what's a day when you're in the middle of space? But I love that River's line. She gives off that big spiel and then she just looks at him and is like, I didn't get you anything. I'm like, oh. And then I have to say the other moment in this is like the way Zoe like sees the issue and immediately like leaps up, like literally leaps up, throws Kaylee out the way. I'm just like, oh, she's such a hero. And she really just is. So impressive. And she really gets thrown back against that table. And I was like, I really like cringed. I was like, oh my God. So of what little time she does get to do stuff in this episode, Zoe is obviously a badass as usual. It's also, like say, they shut the doors. But I like how there's this moment and there's another moment later on. Like, as terrible as Jane is morally and as a person, like, the captain tells him to do something. And there's like, he's just a good working man. Like, he's on it. it's like, go and do this. And it's like, boom, he's there. Like, he knows there's work to be done. You know, they need to save the ship and save their asses. And he's like there. So, you know, he's got some very small redeeming qualities about him.
He does, yeah. Like, if he's being sort of paid the right amount and he's happy, like if he's on the job and he said he's going to do the job, he will do the job.
Yeah, he does the
job. He'll do it as well as he can, which is more than a lot of people can say.
So we then come back to present time again, and Mal continues his journey with this machine part. A door opening leads to another near-present flashback to Simon treating a gravely injured Zoe, while Wash desperately tries to rouse her. So a stunned Kaylee tells Mal that Serenity ain't moving, but Mal prods her to check out the damage, and when Wash refuses to leave Zoe's side and man the bridge, Mal drags him away from her and forces him grudgingly to his post. So this bit has got a lot of, like, for me, I'm like, oh, Kaylee, you know, because she's worried about Zoe, who just saved her life, and it, you know, should be her laying there, not Zoe, kind of thing. And then you've got, like, oh, Wash, because he wants to be by his wife's side, but at the same time, there's nothing he can do there, and they need to get this ship moving and figure out otherwise, you know, they might all die. So it's like, yeah, and I like how we go from this moment with Wash and Mal to, like, then the end of the episode, and it's like this huge kind of, I don't know, like this journey of, like, respect. Like, they respect each other a lot, but, like, there's shit that needs doing, and, you know, sometimes you need someone to just, like, grab you and shake you and get, like, your level head on. So, yeah, it's interesting. They're dynamic and that.
On the surface, it seems like Mal is being a little heartless. Like, you know, Wash just wants to be by his wife's side when she's in critical condition, and no one can fault him for that. But at the same time, Mal still has that real kind of military mindset where he's like, yeah, look, I know she's injured, and I know this looks bad, but, like, you've got a job to do here. You need to be on the bridge. You need to be trying to get us moving again, because you're the only one that can do it. And if you don't do it, we're screwed. And this is, you know, perfectly highlighted when we jump to the scene with them later on in the cockpit, where, you know, he comes up with the great idea to save them all. And it's like, yeah, it needs to be done, but it was a little mean at the time, but he's not wrong to do it.
Yeah, because I also think that, like, I know that Wash is her Wash is her husband, but, like, Mal cares about her just as greatly as a friend and as, like, a companion. So, you know, he's not, yeah, he's just, you know, he's the captain. He has to keep the level head and make sure everything gets done.
Exactly. He can kind of understand the importance of the situation, even if emotionally he probably wants to be by her side just as much as Wash does.
Yeah. Speaking
of Wash, we then jump to another recruitment flashback where we see Mal and Zoe speaking to a younger, gloriously mustachioed Wash who is evaluating the condition of this new ship and considering taking the job as their captain. As Mal and Zoe head off into the depths of the ship, the first mate expresses general misgivings at this potential pilot. Although she doesn't quite know why, she tells Mal that he bothers me. Mal tells Zoe that Wash has come with glowing recommendations and is already being courted by many other captains. Zoe agrees, but nevertheless, he bothers me. Mal mentions they've also got a new genius mechanic, and we all know what was going to happen next, except we don't, because an unfamiliar, unkempt man overhears their discussion and appears to be entertained by Mal's praise.
Yeah, it was that kind of, like, even from watching it again.
I really enjoy that scene.
Yeah, I mean, from watching it again, I remember that it's not Kaylee, but even watching it again after, like, not watching it for a couple of years, I was kind of like, oh yeah, because you like genius mechanic, and you're like, well, yeah, Kaylee's amazing. And then you're like, oh no, wait, it's that dude. Oh yeah, I remember the next scene with them. I remember what happens.
Yep.
It's that part. And then I was just like, who is this mechanic? That's not Kaylee. What's this guy doing?
Yeah, and he may be a genius, but he's not Kaylee. Kaylee's a savant.
Kaylee is one with the ship. But I love, Zoe's just like, I feel like Wash here doesn't get, he seemed very different, like, and you don't get to see, like, a lot of him, really. It's just like, oh wow, look at that moustache. And yeah, Zoe's just brilliant. I don't like him. She's just straight up, I don't like him. There's just something about him I don't like. And you're like, oh, you're gonna love all of him.
How fast hate turns to love.
After all that moustache, we get back to the near present, where Simon jabs a flatline Zoe with a shot of pure adrenaline. And another jump cut takes us to the present, where a lone Mal does the same thing to himself in order to continue his struggle. Jumping back to the near present, Kaylee despondently tells Mal that their life support is entirely disabled, giving them only a few hours of oxygen left. Bum, 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 bum. It's high tension.
Kaylee just has the most expressive face. And she's so sad, and she's like, oh, she looks so sad. I just want to give her a hug. Like, I know you're all dying, but don't look so sad, please. You're making me sad.
Oh, I have given her a hug, and it was fantastic. Just popped back into my memory. She's lovely. Jewel State is so lovely.
I was at a con a few years back, and she was there, but it was getting towards the end of the day, and basically I had to pick whether to go and queue up and see her or go and queue up and meet Amber Rose Reaver from Punisher. And I chose Amber, and I do not regret it in the slightest. She was amazing. But I do feel a little sad I didn't get to meet Kaylee, because I love her. Yeah,
I've not met Summer Glau, but she was at a convention that I went to, but the queue for her table was immensely long, and the person at the back of the queue basically said, like the person that was working at the convention was like, you know, you could get a ticket and try to come back later, but the chances are you're not gonna, because she spends quite a lot of time chatting with everybody, which is like great, because, you know, she obviously cares about meeting her fans and wants to have a good interaction, but yeah, it just makes her queues a lot longer than most people's. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to be here, like, you know, forever and till later, and then maybe not even get to see her anyway. So I saw her from afar and was like, oh, there's Summer Glau, and that was enough.
Still pretty good.
I was like, this is good. She looked very pleasant. Apparently, yeah, all the people at the convention were like, she's just one of the nicest guests we've ever had, and everyone loves her.
That is, absolutely. So yeah, while Simon muses about their potential suffocation, Inara reflects on her love of the Serenity. In his quarters, Book is actually reading his Bible. River stops by to reassure him that they won't suffocate, they'll in fact die of the cold first. On the bridge, an angry Wash snarks about Mal's refusal to accept their doom, pointing out that he deliberately chose a travel path that keeps them as far away from any possible contacts.
And then obviously Wash and Mal, their little interaction, when they just get, you know, they're getting kind of like increasingly like angry at each other. And Wash is just like, well, maybe I should do that then. And they're both like, fine. Like, they're obviously like, they don't want to kind of like admit defeat and be like, oh, I'm sorry, you were right. Oh, I'll go do this. They're just like, even though they're like agreeing with each other now, they're still angry and shouting at each other. It's just brilliant. And then to have Jane run in and be like, stop. Jane's like, stop arguing. And you're like, oh, Jane cares. And then he's like, you're sucking up all the air. It's like, oh, Jane only cares about himself still.
Such a Jane comment is so good.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, he's turned a corner. Oh, wait, no, he hasn't, still just thinking of himself. Fucking typical. For a guy that's meant to be like sort of the hard-boiled mercenary, he does slightly go to pieces and get a little bit kind of paranoid in these. Like, there's a few situations, there's that, and then when they run afoul of the Reapers. Reavers, sorry, I've been watching too much Walking Dead. And he's like, oh yeah, like he slightly loses it when they have a run with the Reavers. There's like, he's meant to have kind of nerves of steel, but he just sort of doesn't.
Well, I was thinking about this when everything first went wrong, the alarms and everything, they're like, oh, we're running out of air. I'm thinking to myself, you guys do live on a spaceship. Like, at any moment, like, something could come flying off your ship and you're going to die. It's, like, a very dangerous way to live, isn't it? Like, so you'd think they'd be more prepared. And, well, actually, saying that, the rest of the crew, they are all very... No one's running around panicking. No one's, like... They're all very calm and very like, this is what's happening, and they're on it. I wonder how many times they've kind of like faced situations similar to this. Yeah, it's interesting to see like how everyone handles it.
I was surprised by how well Simon and River handled it, considering they're probably the least used to sort of space travel, but they both actually seemed relatively calm in the face of impending doom. I mean, I suppose for Simon it kind of makes sense, because being a doctor and a surgeon, he's used to handling kind of those extremely tense situations.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been surprised if River had slightly kind of flown off from one, but she didn't. She held it down.
Yeah, she was very calm this whole episode, and during all the flashbacks as well. Like all the before and after, like during the episode, she's very level-headed, and I guess they couldn't kind of, on top of everything that's happening, they couldn't have like Crazy River. They lucked out.
True, that's probably a bit much.
It would have been a bit much.
They did, yeah.
So
just a bit, yeah.
Just a bit. So we have like Mal and Wash arguing. So as they're arguing, Mal slips in a suggestion to get the attention of a passerby that turns out to have a remote possibly of working. Where Jane ends to complain about they're wasting air, another cut takes back to the present. So this is now where Mal is like hauling the machine part towards the engine room as the PA system needlessly sounds an alarm about the fouled life support and low oxygen levels. So we've had all that little argument, and then now it cuts back again to Mal, and he's like getting closer and closer, and you're like, oh my god, like, is he gonna make it? He's not gonna make it.
They really managed to just like dial the tension up to 11 with that. It's like him like slowly dragging his way along, getting towards the engine, like the freaking PA announcing in multiple languages, like, "Yep, you're fucked. This is why you're fucked. This is how fucked you are." It's like 10 different. It's just, it's so tense. And like we know they're going out okay because A, since episode 4 a million times, and B, this is halfway through the season, they obviously survive. But somehow, despite the fact that you know kind of deep in your core that everything will be okay at the end, you're still just like, they're gonna die. It's some serious work there to get like to really build up that tension even when you actually know they are safe. Mal arrives in the engine room of the Serenity, hollering at Bester, the ship's mechanic, who is air quotes genius, for failing to get the ship underway as promised, especially since they've got a job to do. When Mal arrives, he catches Bester in the engineering... When Mal arrives, he catches Bester with an engineering groupie. When Bester finally notices, he explains the girl gets hot around the engines. Mal isn't interested and orders him to get the girl off the ship and get the engine going. Bester starts to spout various excuses as for why he can't get this done, when the groupie, who is quietly getting dressed in the background, interrupts Bester's spiel to correct him on his inaccurate diagnosis.
We're like, oh, look, it's Kaylee.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw that, I was kind of watching a scene and then you kind of hear this voice and you're like, wait a minute, I recognise that voice. Is that who I think it is back there? And then it is. Wait.
And then we see her emerge from behind the engine, and we're like, oh, it is Kaylee. That's great. Here she is. This is how it happens. So when Bester sputters incomprehension, Kaylee explains the diagnosis, the problem, while on the floor and quickly fixes it. Mal is impressed and offers her a job right there and then, and Kaylee happily runs off to wind up her affairs at home. Bester questions why Serenity would need 2 mechanics, and Mal ominously says, I really don't. It's like such a good, it's just, that guy's just like, shit, I just lost my job. Like, what would have happened? Like, Serenity wouldn't have got off the ground for ages, or if it ever did, it probably would have exploded because this guy didn't know what he was doing.
I saw that he's been working this for apparently like over a week, and Kaylee managed to fix it in sort of a couple of minutes while on her back in the engine room. Like, she's just that good, or Bester is, that bad at what he was doing.
Yeah.
That like she was just lying there like, oh, you need to fix that. She's like thinking about her shopping list for the week.
Mal's like, oh, have you got a lot of experience on a ship like this? And she's like, nope, never even seen one before. Like,
I feel like if we'd had a chance to actually, get a full season of this show, and maybe even, God forbid, a second season, I would have liked them to explore more about Kaylee's ability with engines. Like, it's not just that she's good. Like, Bester is a genius mechanic. Kaylee is on a whole other level. Like, she's a savant. She just understands machines at a genetic level. I'd really like to have seen more of kind of what she can actually do when she's really pushed.
Yeah, and in this episode, there's the moment when she's sitting with the broken part, and that's for me, like, that's what it is to her. Like, being a mechanic is not, it's not all necessarily like parts and things. She's like, you can really see her feeling, and like it's like an emotional state for her, like being one with the ship, and it's like this relationship as a part to like, as opposed to like just pieces and things, but it is sad when she's like, some things are just broken and you can't, even being as amazing as she is, you can't always fix it.
Well, actually, that's the next scene. Like, we jump back to the near present, and it's Mal in the engineering room with Kaylee, and they're sort of poking the engine. She says, "I'm sorry, I'm unable to fix the ship." She tells Mal about the broken catalyzer, which just can't be repaired. It has to be replaced. We jump back to the present time, where we now know what that thing is that Mal was holding. It's the replacement catalyzer. And remembering when Kaylee showed him earlier, he kind of tries to put it into the engine, and it just drops through his hands and falls through the grate into the the bowels of the engine.
Yeah.
And it's a bit where it's like she's walking through and she's like, I don't understand how this happened. Like, usually the Serenity tells me when she's broken.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not just a job for her. She has a real, like, deep emotional connection to this ship. It talks to her in, the rumble of the engine and the whir of the motors. She hears that, and even not even looking at the engine, she can just hear it and be like, oh, that's not right. It's like Serenity's telling me something is wrong. I have to fix it.
Yeah.
Which makes it all the sadder that something now has happened, that she not only could she not fix it, she didn't even know there was something there to fix. Although I remember hearing somewhere, but I discount it from canon because I don't like it, that the problem this episode was because of the thing she did in the flashback. And she mentions something about this part being wrong, and then you jump to now and it explodes, and that's why it went wrong. And it's like, I don't like the idea that
it's her fault. Like,
we're built up to believe that Kaylee is this genius and that somehow she's the one that's responsible for the part breaking. I don't like that.
No, I don't like that because, she says that whatever the parts she took out in the flashback, isn't unnecessary, and I believe that. And this ship's been flying for years, right? Sometimes, and this is the heartbreak in it, is that, like, as much as, like, the ship speaks to her and she, like, knows what's going to be going wrong with it if something goes wrong, usually, this part has just reached the end of its life and it's just a part and it's broken and there's nothing she can do about it. And it's heartbreaking. Oh, seeing him, like, because in terms of, like, foreshadowing, obviously you see it in this scene. She shows him, like, exactly where the part goes and how it goes on. Because otherwise you'd be like if in the present time he's just got that part and he's trying to put it in, you'd be like, Mal would have no idea where to put that.
It goes back a bit to that scene with Mal in the doctor's office when he grabs the adrenaline and, like, shoots himself up.
Yeah.
It's like we see the doctor doing that to Zoe, and that's how, when Mal's there, he knows what to do. He goes to the same drawer, grabs the same thing and gives it to himself. So it's like, we know that, like, it's almost like the near future, the near present flashbacks are showing us how Mal knows what to do in each step of what he's doing in the present, sort of the present day parts. It's very cleverly where they were kind of woven together. Not many people can handle that sort of non-linear storytelling. It's something I've only really seen Tarantino pull off in the past.
Oh, right,
but, and Villeneuve. But Whedon absolutely nails it.
And like, every single cut is nice. So, again, we're cutting. So we're going to the near present. And Mal assembles the crew to order them to split into 2 groups and take, like, each shuttle in opposite directions to find help, however unlikely the possibility of success. So with 4 per shuttle, he decides to stay behind in case Wash's beacon catches someone. Wash rigs a big red, it is a big red button, a big red recall switch on the bridge, so Mal can call them back. Inara objects to Mal's apparent desire to go down with the ship, but Mal refuses to accept defeat. Yeah, I love the big red button.
I also think it's quite a nice kind of scene for Wash, because in the same way that, like, 5 minutes before they were, or a couple of scenes before, they were, throwing each other against the wall, and they were kind of really, like, every kind of interaction between the two of them has been quite heated so far this episode. And you get to this bit and he's like, yeah, I know we're going to do this rescue, but, like, we want to be able to come back and save you if we need to, we want to be able to return. So, like, I can just rig up this thing to, call us back when it's required. It's like, even though they fight, and even though 2 scenes before they were throwing each other around the doctor's office, there is still, like, they will still absolutely be there for each other if they're needed. Like, they are bound together tighter than just a crew. Like, they really are a family. They can fight and they can throw each other around, but at the end of the day, they are absolutely there for each other when it's needed. And it's like it's tiny scenes, like 2 lines, but it says volumes, and I love that.
Yeah, and I also like how, like, with Inara and Mal, it's kind of like, for him, it's like holding on to that last shred of hope that someone will come and save them. And for, like, the others, they feel like he's, like, it's this futile thing where, you know, the chance of someone saving them and getting back to the ship and having everything be okay is, like, really low. But, like, Mal's, like, he's really got that. Like, he really, really thinks it's going to happen, or he just hopes at least that they'll go and find someone, even if he doesn't make it. So it's, interesting to see kind of, like, not like glass half full, half empty type thing. He's a good man. He's a good man.
The next section is a flashback to the past, showing Inara's introduction to the ship she would later almost die in, one of Serenity's shuttles. In response to Mal's somewhat ropey bargaining tactics, Inara confidently announces that he will rent the shuttle to her at a discount to gain a little respectability and help him in his own somewhat less illicit business. The two also have their first fight when Inara tells him that she supported unification. She gives him 2 rules: never walk in uninvited and never call her a whore. Both of which rules he breaks at least once an episode. They are the two, like, in a show about rule breakers, I think those are the 2 rules we see broken the most. I love how from the very first moment they met, the chemistry there was, like, on fire. From the second they were introduced, they were like, yep, this is the person I'm never going to marry, but I'm going to, like, from the rest of my life, we're going to spend our time arguing and then making up and then actually getting married, but we are still totally 1,000% married. Like, there's that one line that's just perfect. Like, oh, you're going to rent the ship to me and for a quarter less. Why am I going to do that? Because you want me. Like, 10 seconds of absolute silence. You want me on your ship. I give you credibility. Oh, yeah, sure. That's what you meant. Yeah, that's why I want you.
I like how, well, she's a little bit less, obviously, like, friendly as usual, because she's got her business face on and she's trying to be like, you know, this is what's happening. So it's interesting to see how much more she's kind of, like, soothed. And I'm wondering if, like, and not being, like, uptight, but obviously she's in a role where you have to be, like, super professional all the time and always have, like, this air about you. And with him, I feel like she has this, like, comfort zone where she can kind of be more of herself. I don't know. I just love them.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah. It feels very much like, even when she's interacting with the rest of the crew, a lot of times she has that sort of companion's mask on. And the only time we really get to see her actually just be her is when she's talking with Mal and when she's talking with Kaylee. Those are the only 2 people she's ever really, like, her barrier is just completely down with those 2. Because she loves Mal and because it's impossible to be anything but kind to Kaylee.
So after that, we come back to the near present when Inara pleads that you don't have to die alone. Mal responds, everybody dies alone. Wash also appears to want to say something about their departing without the captain, but Mal turns his attention back to Zoe. As Mal seals off the ship compartments, the crew silently departs on their desperate missions in opposite directions. I love... I just got the best thing about all of this, as, like, heartfelt as it all is and, like, tension moment and everything, is just Jane, like, coming up and, like, looking like he's going to say a heartfelt farewell, and he's just like, well, and then he just walks straight off.
Yeah.
It's just, like, one of my favourite moments. It's so good.
Absolute classic Jane. I love it. And we get our, I think, third tour, or second of 3 kind of tours through the ship, where we just see him walking through, kind of locking all the doors behind him. It's like, oh, it's so grim. Like, again, we know it all ends happily, but it's very much like kind of, you know, sealing his tomb, just closing all the doors and locking it down. And then we see the dining room and the cake still on the table, and it's like, it was all, they were so close to being happy, but just couldn't. It's such a brilliant scene. So evocative. Yeah. So again, sometime later, Mal is tucked up in his little cocoon in the cockpit, and we see he's awakened by a salvage ship attracted by Wash's beacon. The captain of the ship agrees to help by giving Mal a spare catalyzer. When Mal opens the door to get the catalyzer, the skeptical captain holds a gun on him, whilst the crew ensures no one is there to ambush them. While obviously it wouldn't be these guys, those guys are just kind of one and done. They turn up, they shoot Mal, act like dicks, and then leave. I really love it here that if we had sort of got more of this show, there would have been like an evil Serenity out there. Like we would have met a crew that were very similar in sort of ship size and sort of team build to the crew of the Serenity, but were just absolute dicks. Like just had no moral code, just took any job, like regardless of how many babies they'd have to murder to complete it. And like they were going around doing exactly what the Serenity were doing, but being absolute dicks while doing it. Like a kind of an antagonist group to Serenity. It would have been a really great addition to sort of the lore, but yeah, sadly it never happened.
But yeah, it's weird as well seeing like Mal's got to be like trusting, because I feel like up till this point it's always like, you know, you've got your gun on you and if something goes south you're like prepared, but in this he has to be like, this is his only chance, so he has to be like really trusting and hope that like the other crew are as nice as his kind of thing, because while he has, you know, he does what he's got to do, he's very trustworthy. But anyway, we shoot back to another flashback where Mal and Zoe are being held at gunpoint by 3 bandits, one of whom is Jane. So Mal and Zoe engage in clever banter with the bandits, bandit banter, with Jane providing an example of his limited wit. So when Mal realises how effective Jane was at tracking them, he and Zoe encourage the gunmen to switch sides and join their crew by promising a larger cut from jobs and his own bunk. Jane casually shoots one of his former partners, Marco, in the leg and holds the other at gunpoint while he negotiates for his new job. Yeah, it's just, this is like the perfect intro for Jane.
Yeah, there is no better way to add him to the crew than this. It was just hilarious.
Like when he first starts speaking and Zoe's like, it had a kind of poetry to it, sir. It's, yeah, it's just, I love them. They're always so like deadpan and just like the sarcasm and yeah, they're so brilliant. I love them. And yeah, this is just another thing of like showing us just what Jane cares about. And, you know, this is a crew that he's been running with for however long. And like regardless of whether or not this guy has been boning him over in the pay and, you know, having him share a bunk, like there's obviously no sense of like family or friendship, or even if there was, Jane doesn't care. He wants more money in his own bunk.
Yeah, I got to share a bunk with him, and it's this like grizzled old guy with a massive moustache. Like, he doesn't look like a cuddler. This is going to be a rough night.
The other moment is because we see this with Jane, and the other thing is like when we see them part off in separate ways, Mal says to Anara about like not to trust him. Like he's handy, he's strong, he'll like do good work, but like don't trust him and don't let him take over. Yeah, we're always getting reinforced of what kind of man Jane is. Yeah,
it's like I'd asked a question of kind of the internet in general the other day about who you think the worst friend is in fiction. And there's storied history of all these amazing friendships, Zoe and Mal, for instance, throughout fiction. But like, who is the worst friend you've ever seen in a show? And someone did suggest Jane, and I was like, really, if you think about it, actually, like, it's not that he's not a bad friend, he's just kind of a bad person. But it does feel like he gets better as he goes on, and I do hope, again, for the third time this episode, if we'd had a chance to see the rest of the season and maybe a season 2, I do really like to think that we would have seen Jane slowly become more loyal. Like, there is a bit of growth in him by the end of the season, but I'd like to think that hopefully by the time we reach kind of season 3 or 4, he would have been as loyal as the rest of the crew were. But once again, I guess we'll never know. Back in the near present, the salvage crew signals they're all alone. The captain just casually shoots Mal in the gut so he can steal the Serenity as payment for the part, which is fairly horrible. While the captain enthusiastically chats with his crew, however, Mal finds a hidden gun, pulls it on the captain, and orders them to leave the catalyzer and get off his ship. As soon as the ship is secure again, he collapses onto the cargo bay 4, as shown in the opening scene. So we've come full circle.
I like in this one when he says to Mal, like, you would have done the same. Like, in their position, you would have done the same. And he's like, well, like, basically, I'm not killing you now, am I? Like, I haven't shot you. I could have shot you all up instead of just letting you leave my ship. But, like, I'm clearly a better man than you are. And it's, it's nice to see, like, a very clear, like, juxtaposition of, like, here's a captain that's, like, doesn't give a shit about, like, people and will steal from people. Whereas, like, Mao and his crew, they do some shady jobs. But, like, we've seen that the shady jobs they've done, they try and not have it impact, like, anyone directly. If it's, like, something bad, they're like, oh, no, we're not cool with this.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't just straight up go and, like destroy another ship and rob their stuff or whatever. It's, yeah.
It all harkens back to one of my absolute favourite lines in the whole series. One of my favourite lines in, like, all of fiction. It's an incredibly simple line, but brilliant. It's from, I believe, The Train Job, where they steal the cargo, in air quotes. They find out it's medicine, and then it's treating this horrible disease that's sweeping through the whole thing. So they break the cardinal rule and return to the scene of the crime to give the mayor back his medicine. And the mayor's there, he's like, yeah, where I see it, like, you got two kind of choices. You can, when you something like this, you can either accept it or you can't. Like, those are your options. And Malcolm looks at him and is like, I don't think you have the option there. It's like, as far as Mal's concerned, when you realise that you've stolen medicine that could save a bunch of people, your only option is to take it back, hold your hands up, like, give it back, admit you went wrong, and just, like, you know, try and make amends. It's like, there's no part of him that would ever consider stealing medicine from people that needed it. Like, that to me says everything you need to know about Mal.
So after we see Mal collapse, as he did in the very opening, and it brings us full circle back round so that we're all in current time now. Well, we think it should be. Back in the present time, weakened and injured, Mal manages to drag the new catalyzer out of the engine valves and install it, starting the engine again. Yay, go Mal. He's like trainee mechanic. He slowly makes his way to the bridge but collapses again, short of the recall switch. I was like, look at that big red button he's put there. You can't possibly not hit that. And he makes it like a step away or whatever and collapses. And you're like, no. Again, this was for looking at the ship for me. This time we're going through the ship and it's like a first person view of the ship. So it's really nice to see, like, this is what it would look like if you were walking through the ship of Serenity. And that's cool. Like, you could do that in VR. That'd be cool.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I love this scene because it sums up a lot of kind of the great tragedy of Malcolm Reynolds. Like, he's just always a little bit short. He always wins the battle but loses the war. It's like they were at the Valley of Serenity. You know, they fought the big battle, but they sort of won. But then in the end they didn't. Like, the Independents still lost, and it's like he got the ship fixed. He was moments away from absolute victory, and just like fell over right at the post. Like, he always manages somehow to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and it's all rather sad. He's quite a tragic figure when you really stop and think about it.
So should we see like how hard he's trying? It's like he's been shot in the stomach, like everyone has in this show, but and he's like that's supposed to be like one of the most painful things like ever. He's like had to give himself a shot of adrenaline so that he can keep going. Like the sheer willpower to pull through for his ship and his crew is insane.
Yeah.
Like, for him to have made it through that, is mental. So we're worried. He's passed out. We don't know what's happening. And then we start to hear voices from like all the various flashbacks, and then he gradually regains consciousness in the infirmary where the crew is bustling about. Hurrah! A passive but conscious Zoe welcomes him back to awareness, with Wash giving him a blood transfusion. She takes responsibility for ignoring his orders and returning to Serenity, fortunately since he never sent the recall, but she promises not to do it again. Mal drowsily asks if he went someplace. Book replies, very nearly. This is such a nice scene because it's kind of like the dinner where they're all there at the beginning and now we're all together again, but we're in the infirmary with multiple injuries and all this stuff going on.
It's another example of kind of the episode coming full circle. The episode starts with Mal collapsing on the grate, and then it ends. The final scene starts with him collapsed on the grate. The episode starts with them all gathered together in this happy, fun sort of birthday party meal, and then it ends with them all together and happy, but looking somewhat worse for wear, huddled around their near-death captain in the infirmary. Like, the idea of kind of the cyclical nature of this episode is fantastic, especially with the sort of non-linear way that it's put together. It's all very, very, like, it's a very complex episode for what is essentially quite a simple storyline. It's very well done, the way they've all, like, there's a very good reason this is one of the highest rated episodes on IMDb. It is very, very well put together.
I love how Malcolm wakes up and he looks at Wash and he's like, what's wrong with your arm? He's like, are you okay? He's like, after everything he's been through, and he's still worried about his crew like more than he is about himself. And again, with their relationship journey through this episode of like, you know, arguing and like not seeing eye to eye and then kind of like clearly caring about each other, to now Wash essentially like helping save Mal's life by like giving him blood or whatever. It's a very nice journey for Mal and Wash through this episode.
Indeed. And, you know, it furthers the whole kind of blood brother family motif. Like, they go through the war together and are closer for it. It's all very well done. So many layers. But Inara, of course, is understandably ecstatic to find her future husband still alive, but the mask is down, so she can't actually come out and say it. So with very undecided relief, she's like, oh, we thought we'd lost you. Simon, who is tending to Mal administering 7 different kinds of pain medication, reiterates Zoe's statement that her decision saved his life. And shortly after this exchange, Simon firmly tells everyone that Mal needs to rest, and the rest of the crew all start to trickle away.
So yeah, I think with that, it's just kind of like you say, the Inara thing. It's like, oh, she cares so much, but yeah, in front of everyone, like in the Our Mrs. Reynolds episode, it's like she can't show like her feelings for him. And then we see Mal start to drift off again, and he asks them, "You're going to be here when I wake up." And it's so cute. He reaches for Book's hand. Book takes it and gently assures him so. Reassured, Mal drifts off to sleep once again. Yeah, it's funny to see like this big man, the leader of the ship, one who's like always like on it, like now drugged up and like laying on a bed and being like the vulnerable one, with his crew around, like kind of taking care of him.
And it really kind of ties into the whole idea of kind of like memories and reminiscence that is throughout this episode. Like, this whole way through, as he's been at death's door, he's been thinking back to how he met all these people. And then he wakes up tired but okay in the infirmary, and they all start to kind of drift away from him. And he's like, "I'm not imagining this, right? You are all still here. Like, this isn't a memory. You came back. I'm safe. You're going to be here when I wake up." So yeah, don't worry, we're safe now. It's okay. You can sleep easy. Everything will be okay once you wake up. Really, really beautifully put together scene. And yeah, as you said, one of the rare times we get to see Mal like being vulnerable. Usually he's kind of the stoic of the group, but there's a little softy under there he's tucked away. And then we round off the episode in an old shipyard where a salesman tells Mal, "Yes, sir, it's a right smart purchase, this vessel. Tell you what, you buy this ship, treat her proper, she'll be with you the rest of your life." However, he's referring to a very Thunderbirds-looking yellow sort of rocket ship monstrosity. Mal, however, just does not give a slightest thing. His attention is drifted away as the sailor notices in the middle of his sales pitch. Mal is looking across the yard at an old, broken down, abandoned Firefly-class ship at the edge of the lot. As the salesman tries to attract his attention, for Mal, it's love at first sight. This is just the absolute perfect way to end this episode. Like, the whole way through, we've got this repeated spiel from the salesman talking about how this ship, it's amazing. If you do what you like, you can treat it right. This is the ship that will be with you forever. And we realise in the closing minutes of the episode, he's not even talking about Serenity. He's talking about some other stupid banana boat thing he's probably trying to get rid of so he can get rid of Mal. But Mal cares for none of it. He's set his eyes on Serenity from across the lot, and he's like, nope, that's my ship, that's my home, that's my grave. Give it to me now. I need it. I don't know why, but I was watching this and somehow it really reminded me of Romeo and Juliet. I know that's a bit weird, but trust me, there is a link there. That play opens, it's Romeo and Mercutio, and Romeo is just going on about this girl. He's so in it. I love her so much. I have to be with her. She's amazing. She's the best woman ever. And then he realises he's just talking about some random chick, and he goes to her party, and that's where he meets Juliet. And it's like in the same way, they're in this lot. Yeah, it's Mal and his Mercutio, and they're talking about this ship. Oh, it's the best ship. You get a good crew, we'll be with you forever. And then across the room, his eyes meet with someone he never even thought he'd come across, and he just sees this Firefly, and he's like, nope, that's the one for me. A week later, 6 people dead. I'm going to commit suicide with that one. No, well, kind of lost, drifted off slightly towards the end. But you see the connection there. Like there is definitely a causal link between the two, and I think it's just, I wouldn't be surprised if Whedon was aware of, had that particular sort of idea in mind when he was writing this scene, because it's so brilliantly done.
I feel like for me, he's looking across and it's like, not only is it a really cute little ship, but it's like, compared to the other ships, if they're all like as big as the one that this guy's trying to sell him, is like the underdog, right? It's like this little ship where he can have himself a little crew and it'll be really nice, and it's just like the underdog, and it's broken and no one else would buy it. So for Mao, it's like perfect because he's the underdog, and so it's like, it's perfect. So yeah, so what was your favourite quote overall of this episode?
It's kind of tricky. I think it's kind of hard to say because there's a few quite good ones. It's not the most quotable episode because a lot of the best lines are kind of woven through the whole sort of tapestry of the episode. They don't really stand up on their own. The thing that's so great about them is that they're part of the greater sort of whole. But if I had to, it'd probably be either Zoe's line about it being a death trap from the opening scene, or River's huge scientific explanation that finishes with, I didn't get you anything. And those were probably my two favourite quotes. But yeah, it isn't the most quotable episode for me.
Yeah, I think not so much lines, but it's like moments, this episode. It's like, so like the Mao and Wash argument with them ending just like yelling fine at each other. It's just like that. Those moments, are like key in this episode. And also I do love my couple little Jane moments with the like, you're sucking up the air, and then the well is just like, just brilliant. I'm trying like to watch it really level-headedly and be like, I know like I was like a Jane super fan, and now I'm like, I need to watch this because everybody else told me that you're just a bit of a dick, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, no, I get that. I try not to like be clouded in judgment and like him for, I don't know, no reason. But he's like, he's cool and he's got like an awesome gun.
Vera, top 10 best gun.
Vera, I also like his sidearm, and I love obviously Mal Reynolds' pistol. I love Zoe's it's like shotgun rifle with the like Winchester reload. Yeah, it's so good.
Whatever it is, it's badass.
Yeah, this has got good guns. But yeah, overall, definitely one of the top episodes. It's
absolutely.
Obviously because it's like the origin episode, and on top of like, it's not just an origin episode. We get to see like how all of them originally came to the Firefly, and then to Serenity, and then we also have this like high adrenaline. Are we going to lose anyone? Is anyone going to die, or are they all going to die? Is this the end of the story? This can't be the end of the story. But to see them as a real family unit, it's a great episode.
It's kind of like we're seeing the beginning, middle, and end of the Firefly family, but thankfully there was no end. Well, there was an end, just not in this episode. So we're safe for another week. But it's kind of showing you what you've got to make you really worried about what you might lose within the arc of the episode. But thankfully, this was one of the rare occasions where Joss Whedon chose not to break our hearts, which he so often takes. So I'm quite glad he didn't this time.
It's okay, we'll get there.
Yeah.
We can, after we review Serenity, we can just sit and cry for a little bit. Thank you for joining me in conversation.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, so thank you, and thanks to our amazing listeners. If our listeners have any questions or anything they want to talk about or discuss, you can send letters or emails or, whatever we do nowadays to fireflybits@gmail.com. That's Firefly, BITS, for Back in the Skies, @gmail.com.
Next week, we will be watching Ariel. Hard up for cash, the Serenity takes on a job for Simon, break into an Alliance hospital on a central world, Ariel, so that he can go through a diagnostic of River and the crew can loot the valuable stores of medicine. But River's pursuers are hot on the trail and they receive some unexpected inside help.
If you're hoping for some morals to have made it into Jane's being, don't get your hopes up, especially for this episode.
Yeah.
This is my one. This is the episode that hurts me the most, like, from watching it and being like, oh, I really like that Jane fellow. He's funny. He's, like, not quite in with the rest of the crew. He's, a bit of a wild card. And then I watch this episode and I'm like, oh. I'm like, no. So, yeah, thanks again for listening. And we'll see you next time on Firefly Back in the Skies. Bye.
I also really want to.